It was a crisp Sunday morning, 1945. Sunlight filtered through barbed wire fences, casting long shadows across the muddy courtyards of a European prisoner of war camp. Female prisoners emerged from their cramped barracks, hesitant, eyes wide with disbelief. Whispers rippled through the rows of women. They had been given permission to attend church. For months, their days had been filled with monotonous labor, fear, and the oppressive weight of confinement. The sudden announcement felt surreal, almost impossible. As they walked toward the small wooden chapel at the edge of the camp, the air was thick with anticipation. Some clutched worn hymn books. Others carried nothing but hope. Guards, mostly silent, watched carefully, their posture formal yet respectful. The prisoners glanced at one another, hesitant smiles appearing where there had been exhaustion and despair. The first strains of a distant bell echoed across the grounds, vibrating through the chill morning air. Hearts quickened. For the women, this was more than a religious observance. It was a rare taste of freedom, a reminder of the world beyond barbed wire. As they crossed the final stretch of the courtyard, a quiet awe settled over them, a mixture of wonder, fear, and unexpected gratitude. By 1945, Europe was a patchwork of territories controlled by Axis and Allied powers, and millions of civilians and military personnel were caught in its turmoil. Among them were women imprisoned in POW camps across Germany, Austria, and occupied territories. Unlike the male soldiers who often faced the brutality of frontline warfare, female prisoners experienced a unique set of challenges. The intersection of confinement, limited resources, and social vulnerability. These camps were often repurposed facilities, factories, schools, or even makeshift barracks, hastily converted to house large numbers of captives. Life inside these camps was defined by routine and restriction. Roll calls occurred at dawn, meals were sparse, and physical labor, often exhausting and under harsh supervision, filled much of the day. Sanitary conditions were minimal, and medical care was limited to the most urgent needs. Personal possessions were restricted. Letters from families arrived sporadically, if at all. Prisoners relied heavily on camaraderie and shared routines to endure the monotony and stress of camp life. Administrators of these camps, German officers in most cases, enforced strict hierarchies and rules. Female prisoners were expected to adhere to curfews, perform assigned duties, and maintain the appearance and discipline demanded by their captors. Punishments for disobedience ranged from verbal reprimands to deprivation of privileges or solitary confinement. Within this environment, morale fluctuated daily, often sinking in the face of arbitrary restrictions, hunger, and fear. Amid this constrained existence, religious life held significant importance. Even in confinement, many prisoners clung to faith as a source of comfort and psychological resilience. Secret prayers, whispered hymns, and clandestine gatherings offered moments of spiritual relief, providing a counterbalance to the harsh realities of daily imprisonment. Religion for many became a quiet act of resistance, a way to assert dignity and maintain identity under dehumanizing circumstances. When Allied forces began liberating territories, policies regarding the treatment of prisoners began to change. The United States, in particular, emphasized humane treatment in accordance with the Geneva Convention of 1929, which outlined the rights of prisoners to adequate shelter, food, and medical care, and acknowledged the importance of spiritual life. Officers were trained to provide certain freedoms, limited movement, recreational activities, and opportunities for worship, while still maintaining order and security. This was both a legal obligation and a moral stance, reflecting a commitment to the principles for which they were fighting. Granting access to Sunday church, while seemingly simple, was logistically and psychologically significant. It required coordination between camp administrators, guards, and prisoners. Routes had to be cleared and monitored, attendance tracked, and security maintained without fostering fear or intimidation. For the prisoners, it was an extraordinary concession. a chance to step beyond the oppressive rhythms of camp life, to gather openly, and to connect with faith in a communal setting. The small chapels within or near camps became focal points for this opportunity. Often modest, with wooden pews and a single altar, they offered a stark contrast to the crowded, harsh barracks. Attending church was a delicate negotiation of trust between captors and captives. Guards needed to balance authority with leniency, ensuring that freedom of movement did not compromise security. Meanwhile, prisoners had to navigate disbelief and hesitation. Many had long ceased to expect acts of kindness, especially those that acknowledged their autonomy or humanity. For female prisoners, this opportunity was transformative. Beyond spiritual solace, it symbolized recognition of their dignity and individuality. It validated their identity as human beings capable of thought, choice, and moral reflection, even within the confines of captivity. The act of walking to a chapel, kneeling in prayer, and participating in communal worship, permitted by those who had authority over them, was a subtle but profound assertion of resilience. Thus, in early 1945, as American forces approached and liberated POW camps, the stage was set for moments that were both ordinary and extraordinary. Allowing female prisoners to attend Sunday church would not only provide spiritual relief, but also offer a window into the principles of humane treatment that the Allies sought to uphold. It was a small action with profound significance, bridging authority, morality, and the human spirit, and laying the groundwork for experiences that would leave an indelible mark on the survivors. The broader context of allowing prisoners to attend church must be understood against the backdrop of American military policy and wartime ethics. By 1945, the Allies had gained control over significant portions of Western Europe, liberating towns, cities, and camps from Nazi occupation. American officers, educated in both military discipline and humanitarian principles, were increasingly aware of the need to treat prisoners humanely, not only as a matter of law, but also as a reflection of moral conduct during war. The Geneva Convention provided a framework, but its enforcement depended on officers' commitment and logistical capability. Religious observance held particular importance for women in captivity. Many had been separated from families for years, deprived of community, and subjected to physical and emotional hardships. Faith provided psychological sustenance, a structure of hope amidst despair. Attending church offered an opportunity to reaffirm personal beliefs, regain a sense of normalcy, and connect with others outside of enforced labor and confinement. In this sense, religious access became both a spiritual refuge and a subtle assertion of autonomy. For American camp authorities, the decision to allow Sunday services involved careful logistical and security planning. Routes to chapels had to be cleared and monitored, guards needed to maintain order without appearing oppressive, and schedules were coordinated to avoid conflicts with labor duties or other camp activities. Even a seemingly simple act, walking from barracks to chapel, required layers of oversight, demonstrating the seriousness with which these permissions were handled. The camps themselves were often austere. Wooden barracks, cold floors, and minimal heating characterized most facilities. Prisoners slept in tightly packed bunks, shared scarce food, and had limited recreational outlets. In this environment, the chapel represented a sanctuary, both physically and emotionally. Its walls, though simple, enclosed a space where prisoners could momentarily escape the relentless demands of camp life, reflecting the significance of even modest gestures of humane treatment. Cultural considerations also played a role. Many prisoners were from diverse backgrounds, representing different faith traditions: Catholic, Protestant, and occasionally Jewish. American officers had to navigate these differences carefully, ensuring that access to religious services respected individual beliefs while maintaining collective order. For prisoners, the act of attending church was layered with emotional complexity. Relief, apprehension, curiosity, and gratitude mingled as they approached a space that symbolized both faith and freedom. The historical significance of this practice is profound. By permitting Sunday services, Americans demonstrated that wartime ethics could coexist with military necessity. This act of humanity contrasted sharply with the systemic brutality of Nazi camps, where religious expression was often prohibited, punished, or co-opted for propaganda. In liberated camps, the simple permission to worship signified a restoration of dignity, reinforcing the principle that even in war, compassion and moral responsibility could prevail. Prisoners' reactions were immediate and telling. Many were stunned, unable at first to reconcile the permission with years of oppression. They approached the chapel with tentative steps, unsure whether the offer was genuine. For some, the experience rekindled a sense of community and identity, allowing them to engage in a practice that had been denied for months or even years. Others felt a profound sense of disbelief, questioning why captors would extend such leniency. Yet, as the first services commenced, a quiet transformation began. Whispers of anxiety gave way to murmurs of prayer, and faces hardened by confinement softened with relief. The broader wartime context underscores the courage and foresight of the officers who allowed these services. By choosing to respect prisoners' spiritual needs, they reinforced trust, reduced tension, and promoted order through humane treatment. The policy also reflected the strategic understanding that morale and dignity mattered. Prisoners who were treated fairly were less likely to resist, rebel, or despair, ensuring the smooth operation of camp life. Thus, by early 1945, the stage was set for a profound intersection of faith, freedom, and humanity. American officers, guided by both legal obligation and ethical conviction, allowed female prisoners to attend Sunday church. What might have seemed a small concession would prove monumental in its emotional, psychological, and historical impact. It was a moment when faith, morality, and the human spirit converged under extraordinary circumstances, leaving lasting impressions on those who experienced it. The first angle to consider is the human perspective, the emotional and psychological experience of the female prisoners. For many, captivity had meant months or years of deprivation, isolation, and fear. The announcement that they could attend Sunday church was initially met with disbelief. Some questioned whether the offer was genuine or a trap, while others felt a surge of cautious hope. The act of walking toward the chapel, through open courtyards and past watchful guards, was itself transformative. Each step represented a reclaiming of autonomy, however small, and a temporary relief from the oppressive routines that had dominated their lives. Inside the chapel, the effect was immediate and profound. Women who had spent long periods confined together, often under tension or suspicion, found a space to connect through shared faith. Murmurs of prayer replaced whispers of anxiety. Hymns, hesitant at first, gradually gained confidence, echoing against the wooden walls. The atmosphere became a mix of reverence, relief, and tentative joy, a momentary escape from the harsh realities outside. The human impact extended beyond spiritual comfort. It offered community, solidarity, and emotional resilience, reminding prisoners that they remained fully human despite their circumstances. The tactical or administrative angle examines the decision-making of camp authorities. Allowing prisoners to attend church was not an arbitrary act of kindness. Officers had to weigh security risks, logistical challenges, and the potential effects on discipline. Routes had to be cleared, attendance monitored, and guards strategically positioned to prevent unrest or escape. The decision reflected careful planning, demonstrating that humane treatment could coexist with operational control. By providing religious access, officers reduced tension within the camp, fostered trust, and promoted compliance, showing that morality and effective administration were not mutually exclusive. From the psychological and moral angle, the act of permitting worship carried deep significance. It represented recognition of prisoners' dignity and identity at a time when much of the world around them had denied both. The experience reinforced the principle that even in war, compassion mattered. Prisoners who were treated with respect were more likely to cooperate, less likely to rebel, and more capable of maintaining hope. For the American officers, the decision was a tangible expression of values: justice, mercy, and ethical conduct under extreme conditions. This small act of humanity carried weight far beyond the chapel walls, shaping the moral landscape of the camp and influencing post-war narratives. Finally, the cultural and symbolic angle emphasizes the significance of the ritual itself. Religious observance had been denied or restricted under captivity, often leaving women spiritually and emotionally starved. The chapel became a symbol of freedom, a space where faith could be practiced openly. The act of kneeling, singing, and praying in a sanctioned environment reinforced a sense of normalcy and connection to the world beyond the camp. It also demonstrated the Allies' commitment to human rights and cultural respect, contrasting sharply with the oppressive regimes that had imprisoned them. By combining these perspectives, the scene of women attending church emerges not as a simple ritual, but as a multi-layered human, administrative, and moral event. It illustrates how a single act of permission, carefully implemented, could resonate deeply, restoring dignity, reinforcing authority, and providing hope. In this moment, faith and freedom intersected, revealing the power of compassion and ethical governance even amidst the chaos of war. In the second set of angles, the story of female prisoners attending Sunday church is examined through leadership, morale, and historical contrast, highlighting the broader implications of this act of humanity. The leadership angle focuses on the American officers who authorized the service. These men faced the challenge of balancing security with compassion. Their decision required foresight and discipline, planning routes, scheduling services, and coordinating guards without compromising the camp's safety. By trusting prisoners to follow instructions and respecting their dignity, officers exercised leadership that extended beyond traditional military command. This approach demonstrated that true authority could be rooted in ethical decision-making, not solely in coercion. Their actions sent a clear message: humane treatment and operational control could coexist, creating a more stable and cooperative environment. From a morale and psychological perspective, the impact on the prisoners was immediate and profound. For many women, attending church offered more than spiritual relief. It provided a sense of agency and hope. The act of gathering openly, choosing to participate, and engaging in ritual reinforced personal identity and emotional resilience. Observers noted smiles, tears, and whispered prayers as prisoners embraced a momentary return to normalcy. This improvement in morale often translated into better behavior, cooperation with camp rules, and strengthened solidarity among the women, showing that compassion could influence discipline and community cohesion in captivity. The moral contrast angle emphasizes the stark difference between Nazi-imposed restrictions and American humanitarian policies. Under previous regimes, religious observance was often forbidden or strictly controlled. The ability to attend church freely, even within a controlled environment, was shocking to prisoners. It illustrated a broader principle: that ethical conduct could prevail in wartime, even amid violence and deprivation. This contrast not only affected prisoners' immediate experience, but also left a lasting impression, shaping their perception of the liberators and of human decency under extreme circumstances. The historical and cultural angle highlights the significance of ritual in human resilience. Worship, prayer, and singing were not mere routines. They represented continuity with pre-war life, cultural identity, and personal values. In the context of imprisonment, these rituals became acts of quiet resistance, asserting individuality in a system designed to suppress it. The American permission to attend church reinforced this continuity, allowing prisoners to reclaim elements of their humanity that had been systematically denied. It was a symbolic reaffirmation of dignity, faith, and personal autonomy. Finally, the emotional and human reflection angle underscores the enduring effects of this experience. Many survivors recalled these Sunday services decades later as moments of profound relief, gratitude, and unexpected joy. The simple act of attending church, once inconceivable within the walls of captivity, became a touchstone of hope and a testament to the human capacity to persevere under adversity. For some, the experience reshaped their understanding of morality, trust, and the potential for compassion even in wartime. Combined, these angles reveal a multifaceted story, one where leadership, morality, psychology, and culture intersect. The event was not merely a religious service, it was a powerful demonstration of ethics, resilience, and human dignity. The chapel, though small and simple, became a stage for an extraordinary convergence of hope, authority, and humanity. It was a defining moment that illustrated how thoughtful actions could transform lives, even in the midst of war. The first Sunday service arrived like a fragile promise. Morning light spilled over the camp, illuminating rows of wooden barracks and muddy courtyards. Female prisoners, some still uncertain whether the permission was genuine, lined up in small groups. Whispers carried through the air, a mix of nervous excitement and disbelief. For months, they had been confined, their movements dictated, their autonomy stripped. Now, under the watchful eyes of American guards, they were allowed to walk freely toward the chapel. Every step felt heavy with anticipation, yet charged with exhilaration. The route to the chapel, a modest wooden structure at the edge of the camp, had been carefully cleared and monitored. Guards maintained distance, their presence firm but unobtrusive, a deliberate balance between security and respect. Prisoners hesitated at the threshold, hands clutching hymn books or folded sheets of paper with prayers scribbled in secret. Some paused to exchange uncertain glances with companions, while others closed their eyes, drawing on memories of pre-war worship or the comforting cadence of familiar hymns. Inside the chapel, the atmosphere was almost surreal. Sunlight streamed through simple windows, illuminating the faces of women who had endured months of fear and deprivation. The wooden pews, though plain, offered the first sensation of comfort in weeks. As the first notes of a hymn rose tentatively, the effect was immediate and transformative. Voices that had been silenced by confinement began to merge into a tentative chorus. Tears, unbidden, streaked dirt-smudged faces, reflecting the relief, astonishment, and gratitude that simmered beneath the surface. American officers observed quietly from the back, ensuring order without intruding. Their presence was a reminder that freedom was still bounded, yet it also reinforced the sincerity of the gesture. The service was not a performance. It was an acknowledgement of dignity, an affirmation that these women, though prisoners, retained their humanity. Guards and officers noted the change almost instantly. The camp, usually filled with tension and subdued murmurs, now resonated with harmony, reverence, and a shared sense of peace. The emotional weight of the moment was amplified by the prisoners' awareness of the contrast with their previous confinement. Months of regimented labor, minimal contact with the outside world, and the constant fear of punishment had shaped a collective expectation of cruelty and deprivation. The permission to attend church disrupted this narrative, introducing an element of surprise, trust, and ethical recognition that prisoners had not anticipated. It was a psychological turning point, a moment when hope and faith intersected with the practical exercise of liberty. During the service, interactions between prisoners and guards revealed subtle but significant shifts. Guards, instructed to maintain discipline without intimidation, found themselves witnessing a quiet transformation. Prisoners approached the pews with newfound confidence, bowed their heads in prayer, and sang hymns with growing assurance. The ritual created a shared understanding. Trust, once improbable, was being carefully established. For officers and guards, it was a tangible demonstration of how humane policies could engender cooperation, reduce tension, and restore order without coercion. The cadence of the service was deliberate. Hymns alternated with short prayers, allowing prisoners to reflect, breathe, and absorb the extraordinary nature of the occasion. Some whispered quietly to one another, sharing long-forgotten lines of scripture or personal reflections. Others simply closed their eyes, letting the moment wash over them. The act of communal worship, sanctioned by authority, was a reclaiming of agency and identity, a silent affirmation that their inner lives could not be confined by walls or barbed wire. As the service progressed, the impact became evident not only within the chapel, but throughout the camp. The quiet anticipation, the hushed conversations, and the tentative smiles reflected a subtle shift in the camp's atmosphere. Fear and suspicion were replaced, if only temporarily, by hope and reassurance. The prisoners' behavior after the service suggested a renewed sense of purpose and resilience, as though the act of worship had strengthened both their spirits and their capacity to endure the remaining hardships of captivity. By the time the service concluded, a transformation had occurred. Women who had entered the chapel with doubt and hesitation now emerged with calm, composed expressions. Some clasped their hymn books to their chests, while others walked slowly, savoring the newfound freedom of movement. Guards and officers noted the change with quiet satisfaction. The prisoners, though still under supervision, displayed trust, discipline, and renewed morale. The first Sunday service was more than an event. It was a pivotal moment, a turning point in the relationship between captors and captives, where humanity triumphed over suspicion and dignity was momentarily restored. The weeks following the first Sunday service revealed the profound and lasting impact of this simple act. For the female prisoners, attending church became a ritual of renewal, an anchor amidst the uncertainty and fear that defined camp life. Each service drew more participants, as word spread that this opportunity was genuine and respected by the American officers. Women who had initially hesitated now approached the chapel with quiet determination, carrying worn hymn books, scraps of paper with prayers, or simply their presence as an act of faith. Inside the chapel, the atmosphere grew richer and more communal. The songs, once tentative, resonated with strength, echoing off the wooden walls and blending voices that had long been silenced. Prayer became both personal and collective, connecting individuals across the pews in a shared experience of hope, resilience, and spiritual affirmation. Officers observing from the periphery noted subtle but measurable changes in morale. Prisoners were calmer, more cooperative, and increasingly engaged in constructive interactions with one another and with camp staff. The decision to continue Sunday services demonstrated American foresight and ethical leadership. Guards were trained to supervise without intimidation, providing a controlled environment that fostered trust rather than fear. Routes to the chapel were cleared methodically, and the schedule respected labor and security demands, ensuring that the privilege of worship did not compromise operational control. This careful balance reflected a broader understanding. Moral action and effective administration were mutually reinforcing, not mutually exclusive. The psychological effects were particularly evident in the prisoners' daily lives. After services, women exhibited greater composure during roll calls and labor assignments. They shared stories, songs, and prayers with fellow captives, creating a stronger sense of community. These small improvements in morale had practical implications: heightened cooperation, reduced tension within the camp, and strengthened the social fabric among prisoners, easing the responsibilities of the officers and guards. Moreover, the repeated observance of church services served as a visible contrast to prior captivity under Nazi regimes, where religious expression had often been suppressed or punished. For many prisoners, the realization that captors could allow, even facilitate acts of worship was transformative. It shattered expectations of cruelty, replaced fear with cautious optimism, and instilled a belief in the possibility of ethical treatment even in wartime. This contrast was not lost on officers who recognized that humane treatment could produce both moral satisfaction and practical benefits, fostering an environment of relative stability. The services themselves became increasingly elaborate, within the constraints of camp life. Prisoners took responsibility for organizing hymns, reading scriptures, and assisting one another in navigating the rituals. Officers observed this initiative with interest, noting that it encouraged leadership, responsibility, and engagement among the women. The chapel, modest as it was, became a microcosm of restored dignity and self-expression, a space where prisoners exercised agency within the boundaries of captivity. The impact extended beyond individual morale. The services fostered mutual respect between prisoners and officers, creating a relationship grounded in trust and ethical recognition. Guards reported fewer infractions, improved cooperation, and a reduction in friction between captives and authority. For officers, this demonstrated that small acts of humanity could yield disproportionately positive outcomes, reinforcing both ethical standards and operational effectiveness. The crescendo of this turning point came during a particularly memorable Sunday, when prisoners were allowed to participate in a joint hymn, led by an officer with musical training. The sound filled the chapel, blending voices across generations, backgrounds, and experiences. Tears flowed freely. Some prisoners wept silently, others sang with vigor. The moment encapsulated the transformative power of the gesture, a convergence of faith, dignity, and human connection that transcended the boundaries of captivity. In historical context, these services illustrate the importance of morale and ethical leadership in wartime. They were not trivial. They reshaped interactions, instilled hope, and demonstrated that even small acts of compassion could alter the psychological landscape of a POW camp. For the women, each Sunday was both a spiritual reprieve and a profound affirmation of their humanity, challenging the dehumanization they had endured. By the time the camp was liberated, the legacy of these Sunday services was clear. Prisoners carried with them not only memories of survival, but also the imprint of dignity, moral recognition, and communal resilience. The act of allowing them to attend church had transformed the camp from a space of purely physical confinement into one where ethics, faith, and humanity were actively reaffirmed. The events of these weeks set the stage for understanding the immediate and long-term aftermath, the effects on prisoner behavior, post-war reflection, and the enduring significance of small acts of humanity in the context of total war. The immediate aftermath of allowing female prisoners to attend Sunday church revealed the profound influence of small acts of humanity on morale, behavior, and camp dynamics. For prisoners, the opportunity to engage in religious observance restored a sense of normalcy, agency, and dignity that had long been suppressed. Women who had been confined to rigid routines now experienced a structured but voluntary engagement with faith, community, and personal reflection. The psychological benefits were evident. Anxiety lessened, cooperation increased, and social bonds among prisoners strengthened. Officers observed measurable changes in the camp's atmosphere. The weekly services created a predictable, positive event that helped regulate prisoner behavior. Women approached labor assignments and daily routines with greater composure, demonstrating that ethical treatment could reinforce discipline. Guards noted a decline in minor infractions and disputes, as the act of granting religious freedom encouraged respect for authority. The success of the program validated the principle that humane treatment and operational control could coexist, producing both ethical and practical benefits. The spiritual dimension of the services also had lasting effects. Prisoners, many of whom had relied on clandestine prayers or whispered hymns to endure captivity, were now able to express faith openly. This communal worship fostered a sense of shared resilience and mutual support. Personal and collective hope, previously fragile, began to flourish. For many, the chapel became a sanctuary not just for prayer, but for emotional healing, a space to process trauma, express grief, and cultivate courage in the face of prolonged uncertainty. Additionally, the services had a symbolic significance that extended beyond the immediate environment of the camp. They represented a clear contrast to the brutal conditions imposed by Axis powers, highlighting the ethical principles underpinning American military policy. Prisoners were confronted with a tangible demonstration of respect, morality, and legality, reinforcing the notion that humane treatment was possible even amidst the chaos of war. This moral distinction left an enduring impression, shaping prisoners' perceptions of the liberators and their broader understanding of human decency. The logistical execution of the services further amplified their impact. Officers meticulously coordinated routes, schedules, and supervision to ensure both security and dignity. The careful planning demonstrated that ethical considerations were not incompatible with military efficiency. By providing structured opportunities for worship, American forces illustrated that leadership could embody both authority and compassion. Prisoners internalized this lesson. Obedience, cooperation, and moral engagement were not mutually exclusive. The emotional resonance of these services extended into interpersonal relationships within the camp. Women began to share responsibilities, assist one another in navigating the rituals, and provide encouragement for those hesitant to participate. These interactions fostered camaraderie, mutual respect, and resilience, creating micro-communities of support that strengthened the prisoner's ability to endure daily hardships. Even simple gestures, helping a companion kneel, guiding a hesitant friend to a pew, or sharing whispered prayers, became acts of solidarity that reinforced social cohesion. Ultimately, the first weeks following the introduction of Sunday services demonstrated that the combination of faith, ethical leadership, and structured freedom could produce profound outcomes. Morale improved, behavior stabilized, and prisoners experienced renewed hope. These effects were not fleeting. They left an imprint on daily life within the camp, creating a foundation of trust, dignity, and resilience that would persist even under continued confinement. This initial aftermath sets the stage for a deeper examination of the long-term consequences. How these acts of humane treatment influenced prisoner experiences, post-war reflection, and historical understanding of morality and ethics in wartime. The long-term aftermath of allowing female prisoners to attend Sunday church extended far beyond the immediate improvement in morale and behavior. For the women, these services became lasting symbols of dignity, hope, and resilience, reminders that even in captivity, ethical action and compassion could exist. Survivors often recalled these moments decades later as among the most meaningful experiences of their imprisonment, proof that humanity could endure, even in the shadow of war. Prisoners' engagement in communal worship fostered a renewed sense of identity and personal agency. Many women had been stripped of their roles, autonomy, and self-expression within the camp. The chapel, however modest, became a space where they could assert their individuality, participate in decision-making, and reconnect with cultural and spiritual practices. These experiences contributed to emotional recovery, strengthened social bonds, and helped prisoners maintain a sense of self, critical for psychological resilience during and after captivity. From the perspective of American officers, the practice reinforced the strategic and moral value of humane treatment. Allowing prisoners access to religious services was not merely symbolic. It was practical leadership, demonstrating that ethical governance could produce measurable benefits. Camp order improved, tension decreased, and trust between captors and captives deepened. This model of compassionate authority would inform broader post-war policies on prisoner treatment, influencing Allied approaches to both European and Pacific theaters. The contrast between Allied conduct and the brutal practices of Axis regimes was also starkly evident. Under Nazi authority, religious expression had often been prohibited, restricted, or co-opted for propaganda. Prisoners who experienced American-sanctioned church services were shocked by the difference, a clear demonstration that wartime morality could be upheld without compromising security or operational effectiveness. The psychological and ethical impact of this contrast extended well beyond the camp, shaping post-war narratives and survivors' understanding of justice and human dignity. Culturally, the weekly services reinforced continuity with life outside the camp. Prisoners connected with traditions, music, and rituals that had been interrupted or denied. Hymns and prayers became acts of resistance and affirmation, ways to reclaim a sense of normalcy and personal meaning. The ritual of attending church each week, witnessing the trust and respect granted by officers, allowed prisoners to internalize a profound lesson that faith, culture, and morality could survive even under extreme adversity. The impact was also visible in post-war reflections and memoirs. Many survivors described the chapel and the Sunday services as defining moments, shaping their memory of captivity not solely as a time of suffering, but also as a period where ethical leadership and small acts of kindness made an indelible difference. Officers who had facilitated these services were remembered with gratitude, their decisions viewed as morally courageous amid the broader horrors of war. Historically, these events illuminate a crucial principle: that wartime decisions extending beyond combat can carry lasting moral, social, and psychological significance. Small gestures, permission to pray, attend a service, or practice faith, reverberated far beyond the immediate moment, influencing prisoner resilience, cohesion, and post-war perceptions of justice. They underscored the fact that human dignity could be preserved even in extreme circumstances, leaving a legacy that transcended military necessity. In conclusion, the long-term aftermath of the Sunday services highlights the transformative power of humane treatment. Prisoners experienced restored dignity, psychological relief, and spiritual affirmation. Officers witnessed tangible improvements in morale, cooperation, and trust. And the historical record preserved a testament to ethical leadership and compassion in wartime. The chapel, simple and unadorned, became a symbol of humanity, resilience, and the enduring impact of small acts of kindness in the darkest of times. The story of female prisoners attending Sunday church demonstrates the enduring power of humanity, faith, and ethical leadership amid the dehumanizing conditions of war. In a world dominated by fear, deprivation, and violence, the simple act of granting prisoners the ability to worship became profoundly transformative. It was a reminder that even in captivity, individuals could reclaim dignity, exercise agency, and connect with their inner selves and with one another. For the prisoners, each service was more than ritual. It was an assertion of identity. The ability to kneel, sing, and pray, small gestures of normalcy, offered psychological relief and emotional strength. It reinforced bonds among women, creating networks of mutual support and resilience that carried them through the harsh realities of daily confinement. These moments of spiritual freedom underscored a broader truth. Morality, compassion, and ethical action are not luxuries, but essential tools for human endurance. For American officers, the act exemplified enlightened leadership. It balanced operational control with humanity, demonstrating that strict supervision and ethical consideration could coexist. By respecting the prisoner's spiritual needs, officers fostered trust, reduced tension, and affirmed the principles for which they were fighting. This approach left a lasting impression on both captives and historical observers, illustrating that war does not necessitate the abandonment of compassion or morality. Historically, the experience reflects a broader lesson about the human dimension of warfare. The chapel, though modest, became a space where ethical choice, cultural continuity, and spiritual resilience converged. It showed that even the smallest gestures, permission to attend a service, acknowledgement of personal dignity, can ripple outward, influencing behavior, morale, and memory. Ultimately, the Sunday services at the camp stand as a testament to the power of small acts of humanity in shaping history and human experience. They remind us that war, while destructive, also illuminates the capacity for compassion, ethical leadership, and moral courage. For the women who walked through those chapel doors, and for the officers who made it possible, the experience became a defining moment, a convergence of faith, dignity, and humanity that endured long after the barbed wire had vanished.